Hello, and welcome back to Dicebreaker, where today we played, we're doing that again, The Mirroring of Mary King. Nailed it! It's a preview looking at the new game or upcoming game by the maker of Cosmic Frog, which is a game that was my favorite game of 2020. And this is a 2-player game, kind of like area control with like something else mixed in. And you're both playing Mary Kings, but different Mary Kings. So one of you is Ghost Mary King, and the other one is like modern day alive Mary King.
Yeah.
And you have the same deck of cards, and you're using this kind of grid of cards that are double-sided. Some of them have real life Mary King, parts of her, and the other side is like the ghostly version of her. And you're kind of fighting for control to flip those cards to be all the same side. If that makes sense? That makes sense, Meehan?
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, well, you would. You've played the game.
They're double-sided, and there's a different image on each side, and when you place them all together with the matching side, then they make up the image of either Mary King or Ghost Mary King. So that's one of the ways that you can win the game. The other ways, Lolies, there are 2 other ways, aren't there?
Yeah, so flipping it all was one. One of them is when you get to the end of the week, you kind of count your points, as it were, which is a combination of the cards left in your deck. So you each have you start with a deck of 30 cards that are identical. And so it's counting how many cards are in your deck and the number of cards in this kind of grid that are your side, on your side,
King.
right?
Yeah,
you're a Mary King, exactly.
Yeah.
What is the third way? I've completely blanked on that.
It's if your opponent runs out of cards in their deck. So if they, I believe there is a specific term for it. It might be decked. But yeah, when when your opponent, so you need to have a hand of 5 cards every turn. So at the beginning of your turn, if you can't draw up to 5 cards from your deck, then you immediately lose the game and your opponent wins. So there are 3 ways to win or lose the Mirroring of Mary King.
We were really struggling to say the name of this game a few times before, and that's why we're really making an effort to wrap around. No, can't even say that sentence. Wrap our mouths around that one.
There are a lot of R's involved,
which I really struggle with.
Yeah, same things.
Yeah. So the designer is James Felli, as previously mentioned, also kind of known as Devious Weasel on Twitter. And I'm actually just on his Twitter. I realized that he's posted the 2 images on his Twitter. So you've got the 2 Mary Kings on there, and I really like the artwork so far. I know there's still some of the artwork is in progress. So the kind of main image that we use, the card flipping one, he was saying that was confirmed. That was pretty much set as it was, but it was more the cards that we have in our hand that were still being processed. Now, a turn is really interesting in this game as well, isn't it? Because the Ghost Mary King starts with their 5 cards in their hands, and you have a mixture of control cards, which are the cards that allow you to flip the cards that you're trying to flip. The tiles, and action cards, which have special abilities, and there's always 2 action on each card, and you can kind of choose which action you play when you play the card. And those can be pretty powerful. Like we had one which allowed you to lock down pieces, which meant that before the next player, or even yourself, tries to flip a certain card, if you've put a lock on it, they just remove the lock instead of flipping the card. So there was a couple of games, I mean, we played the games 3 times, and I think 2 out of those 3, we really used that lock ability to help us win the game, essentially. But yeah, there's a lot of very interesting abilities in the game. And they are identical, again, for both characters. So depending on when you use them and how you use them, also you can potentially buy your opponent's action cards, so you can take their abilities away. It's all quite interesting, isn't it? The way it works.
Yeah.
And
so there's like a shared pool of cards that you'll have in on either side of the kind of game board made up of the tiles. And so the ones on your side you can buy by discarding a card from your deck, and then you can keep that in your hand for as long as you want, but the ones you buy from your opponent's side you have to use instantaneously. So it often depends on kind of what you think is going to work at the time. We both used, like Loli said, we both used that opportunity to kind of do like a 1-2 punch of combining certain control cards with that particular action card. And there are 2 actions that you can potentially use on the ability cards, and some are just more useful for certain situations than others. And then some of those abilities you can use outside of your turn of play as well. There's a particular action card that's really powerful that so we haven't gotten to this bit yet. At the end of your turn, depending on how many tiles are flipped over to your side, your picture, you and your opponent will be forced to discard cards from your deck. So obviously if you've just played your turn, you've managed to flip over quite a lot of the tiles onto your side, then your opponent's going to be forced to discard, up to I think it's 3 cards from their deck is the max amount. And those tiles that you flipped over also have to be connected via their sides, so it has to be like an area of the board. So there is a card that you can get, an ability card, which you can play whenever your opponent tries to make you discard cards, that basically negates that entirely, which we saw that pop up quite a few times in the game, didn't we, Lolies? It was always a really strong card to play, because you don't want to have your deck discarded through, both so you don't lose by running out of cards, and so that by the end of the game you have plenty of cards left to help you score. So the ability cards were really interesting. There were definitely ones that I think were more useful than others.
There was one card which neither of us really ever touched, and we kind of discussed it with James at the end. I don't even remember what the card really did.
It was
I remember both of us.
I think it was mirror image or something like that.
It might have been the mirroring card.
Where I think it's something like you can swap, you can flip tiles that are adjacent to each other or something like that.
Yeah, but they had to be opposite, right? They had to be from the different image sides.
Yeah. And I think we discussed how that card would only really be useful if you could combine it with a control card that could work really well alongside that. So I think there is in the game there were quite a few elements of comboing certain cards together, with the card that locks the tiles. I think that's really interesting. I do like it when games do that. And those first 2 games that we played, they were over so quickly just because of the cards that we'd been dealt and had appeared in the shared buying pool. It was wild, the fact that I think you won the first game because you played that lock combination with the area control, the area control cards. And I think Jim said that there were a lot of test players hadn't used that card very much.
Yeah, he said that a lot of them thought that card was quite weak and it wasn't very good or whatever. And it was weird for us to hear, I think, because we relied quite heavily on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I won the first game in 2 turns having used that strategy, and you won the next game on your first turn having used that same strategy. It was for us, we were oh, okay.
It was a really powerful sort of strategy of being able to lock down certain tiles. Then you could use an action card that would otherwise mean that you're potentially flipping over tiles that you don't want to flip over. So by playing that lock card, you're avoiding that. So that's how we both got all the tiles on the side that we wanted them to be on and win the game. But I think a lot of that was to do with just whatever was drawn. There is a luck element to deal with what cards that you can get. It was just apparently Jim said 7% of games overall had ended in the first 2 turns or something like that.
Yeah, he said it was quite unusual. So the fact that our first 2 games were so quick was pretty strange, abnormal, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, at first we were like, oh wow, this game goes really quickly, huh? But then I think we played a third game that went all the way to the last. So there are 5 rounds that kind of represent the 5 days where Mary King, the mortal, is kind of fighting off this possession from this ghost. It's like based on a kind of cool Scottish urban legend, like in
so there's Edinburgh. A place called Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, which is like it's in the historic old town, and it's like, I guess, meant to be haunted or whatever.
Yeah. It's appeared on Most Haunted multiple times, apparently.
Oh, really? I've never seen that.
So there you go. So yeah, and the interesting thing about each of the rounds is that each player is able to play a certain amount of control cards each round, and that number kind of goes down every round.
Every day,
Yeah, so by the 5th day, you're only allowed to play 1 unless you have a card that kind of allows you to play more than 1. There is a card that allows you to do that. Whereas the number of cards that you can buy each turn goes up with each of the rounds. So by the time you get to the 5th day, you can buy I think it's up to 5 cards from the shared pool. So that's risk. There's that risk reward element of you're having to discard cards to buy cards from the shared pool, but it might nab you the game. So I think Jim described how it was like a feeling of desperation between the 2 sides of Mary King.
Yeah, he described the board that we had described as being the tiles that are kind of the 2 sides of Mary King. That was her sanity. I think that was like a sanity board. So it was like a constant struggle between the ghost Mary and the kind of real life Mary, fighting for their kind of sanity and like and who's got control at the moment. Yeah, and then the fact that they kind of lose control as they go, as you say.
Yeah, and I think that mechanic of, restricting how many control cards you can play towards the end of the game definitely makes your decisions kind of matter and like a lot more. There's a sense of you're running out of time, so you have to be like very careful with which cards you kind of choose to play as the number of cards you can play kind of whittles down. So once you kind of know that fact is, that it's coming, it's very much at the start of the game, you kind of want to take advantage of the fact that, I can play like, more control cards at the moment. Maybe I want to try and set myself up so that by the last few rounds, I'm in a better position. So I'm not struggling so much with fewer cards to play. But obviously, the more cards you play, the more cards you have to draw every round into your hand. So there is that, do I want to go in hard at the start or do I want to kind of stay cautious? I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I felt it was quite odd, I thought, in the 3rd round that we played, because as you say, like the first 2 rounds, the first 2 games, I should say, were so quick, and we were able to play all the control cards, and it was over and after 2 turns max. That when we finally played that 3rd game and we got down to Friday, the end of the week, and we got to that point where we could only play like 1 control card or 2 control cards on the Thursday, as it were, I was a bit like, oh, well, now I have to think more about how many cards I want to play, because now I'm thinking about how many cards I left in my deck and the fact that I want to make sure I have more cards in my deck than Meehan, because at the end of the day that could mean winning me the game. So it went from me being quite careless at the beginning to just trying to flip all the cards and play as many cards as I could, to being a lot more calculated at the end and being like, okay, is this card really worth playing? Like, it's going to take a card from my deck. There's also that thing of, obviously we start with control and action cards in our deck, but as you said at the beginning, there's the kind of shared pools that we can buy from, and there's no like currency per se in the game. The currency is you discard one of the cards from your deck to buy one of these other cards. So you're taking a risk because you don't know what card you're going to discard. So you could discard a really good action card or control card for a card that I guess is more guaranteed because you can see it and you know what it does. But again, it's like, is it worth me whittling down my deck and potentially costing me points in order to buy a specific card? It I don't know, it was very interesting. And I said to Jim at the end that, like, it's definitely one of those games I'd want to play a lot to figure out, like, what the best strategy is, because we'd played 3 pretty different games, and I'm still like, oh, what else could I do? How else could this work out? Like, what could I have done differently?
Yeah, I think because there is an element to, obviously, what you draw, there is an element to randomness. So you've got to work with whatever strategies you have available to you. And obviously you don't exactly know what your opponent is going to do on their turn. Like, you can't exactly predict what they're going to do because you can't see what's in their hand. And also, like, the board of tiles, it changes so frequently that it's not like you can think several steps ahead and go, I think this is what they're going to do. It is very much a, what do I want to do at the here and now, and how can I, maybe maintain my deck in future rounds. And there is like a push and pull between, obviously, like at the end of your turn, you're going to be, discarding cards depending on how many tiles, your opponent has flipped on their side, and then that will happen on their turn as well. So there is an element, do I want to try and minimise how many cards I'm going to be discarding on my turn, and maybe the opponent's turn, but, like, you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know how many tiles they're going to be able to flip. So, and obviously in order to flip tiles, you need to play cards. So there is like a push and pull between, do I play more cards to try and secure myself a better board for now? Or do I want to try and hold on to my cards a bit more and just, like, deal with having to discard cards? It's a really interesting sort of dynamic between the do I go for it or do I kind of hold back a bit more? And there's a lot of that in, like, the different mechanics of the game, like whether you're buying cards, whether you're playing them, whether you're and there are some
I think works really well with the theme again, because that's kind of what he's going for, right? With the struggle between the 2 Mary Kings.
Yeah. And I think, some of the ability cards are really interesting. There was one that allows you to, like, turn back time in terms of...
Yeah, which I think Jim showed us at the end, but we'd never really...
I had it in my hand at one point. But it just wasn't a good idea for me to play it then.
Simply, right. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, because I believe the ghost always goes first. And so this card allows you to basically move the game back around, I think. Yeah. And I think I was playing as Mortal Mary, and it just wouldn't have been very, at that time, it wouldn't have been a good idea because... we were on Thursday or something like that, or Friday.
I think we were on Friday and you were looking like you were going to win anyway.
Yeah. So obviously playing that card could have given, me another round, but it would have also given Lolies another round as well. So I kind of wanted to just by that point I was in a relatively good spot. And I think I won by a point. It was something ridiculous.
I think it was 2. Yeah, it was very close. It was very close.
Yeah. So that one made it all the way to the end, and we devised our points. But I would say that when Jim was describing the concept to us from before we started playing, I was thinking, there's a ghost and there's this mortal. And it's a 2-player game. I was like, is this asymmetric? Does the mortal and does the ghost, do they have different ability? Because, the one is undead and one is living. And I would say, I think it would be interesting to see an asymmetric game with that kind of theme. I just sort of jumped ahead as soon as he started explaining that. But, the game works well as it is, and I think, like, if it had asymmetric elements, it might complicate things. Because it's not.
I think it would definitely. Yeah, I think it would make it a little bit more complicated, and I think it would also probably make it a bit longer. the way that it is now, I mean, those first couple of games we played in 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe. Even the third game where we played all the way through took less than half an hour, I reckon.
Yeah,
and they're very
half an hour's max.
Yeah, it was definitely at a point now where, and I believe this is pretty much the finished game, where it's one of those games I could like quite easily teach to friends and family who are not really into board games, because it is very simple. Yeah, it's like the simplest of rule sets. And I agree. I do think asymmetric would be quite interesting, especially when you were kind of saying about, you know, the two sides. It makes sense in what you're saying, but I also think, I guess, what they're going for is it makes sense in what they've gone for.
Yeah, because they're meant to be two sides of the same sort of person. It makes sense with that, and I think the theme is probably something that, like a lot of board games, again, don't quote me on this, would have quite possibly come after the initial, you know, design of the mechanics and stuff. So, yeah, but no, it's good. Like, it's quick, it's fairly easy to teach, and yeah, we both had a good time with it, and I think we both would, you know, if we had the opportunity, we both would give it another go. So yeah, sure. I'm looking forward to seeing it come out.
Yeah, we don't have an idea of when it's coming out, do we? I don't remember Jim saying anything in terms of when he expected it to. I mean, he told us it was what, like 95% done, 97% done. So it's almost there. I think there's just some artwork left to do. Yeah. And then that's pretty much it. How long it takes after that, it'll probably be at least a few months. Yeah. You're doing or you have done a written article on the game, right? So we should be expecting that on the website this week.
Yeah, it's more of a kind of news piece, sort of summarising what the game is about and what you do in it. Because this was our opportunity to chat, you know, casual about the game.
Exactly. Yeah, we've laid down our thoughts here.
Yeah.
What more is there? Cool. Well, we'll leave it here then. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.
Yeah.
If you'd like to see more videos from us, of course, you can head over. Well, you're already on YouTube /Dicebreaker. Some of the videos should be popping up on the screen shortly. You can also head over to dicebreaker.com for that news piece that Meehan just mentioned, and lots of other amazing articles written by our editorial staff, of course, Alex Meehan and Matt Jarvis, and lots of great guest writers as well. So that's it from us. Thanks again for watching. And
have a spooky day.
Have a spooky day. Bye.